What is up, guys? Welcome back to another UFC prediction video. This week, we got UFC Vegas 89, Rose versus Ribas. Pretty shit card for the most part, just like last week, and the next two UFC Apex Fight Night cards. I know that we have UFC 300 coming up and UFC 299 was just 2 weeks ago, but these cards are just absolutely atrocious. And I know that they had to stack those two cards to make them really good. And it's going to be a give and a take with some of these fight nights. But I mean, some of these are just absolutely diabolical. And they're just something that you're going to have to get through. But I'm still going to be giving my full card predictions for each of the fights on this card in today's video. So we're going to get right into it now. Our first fight on the card, we got Muhammad Usman versus Mick Parkin. And at least we have kind of a meme of a fighter in Muhammad Usman making an appearance on this card. And hopefully this fight won't be too stinky. But I'm going to be taking Muhammad Usman to win this fight by a decision. And the reason being is that even though Muhammad Usman is absolute dog shit when it comes to the sport of mixed martial arts, he's terrible. Like, there are kids that have been training for 6 months to a year out there right now with better technique than Usman. But Mick Parkin is kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum. A little more technical, but, you know, he doesn't really have any type of danger on the feet, especially. Not really a ton of pop. He does train with Tom Aspinall, so he's in a good camp. Of course, training with a lot of like-minded fighters, a lot of heavyweights in that camp as well. So he's definitely going to be used to the physicality, but I'm going to be picking Muhammad Usman here just because he has the ability to impose his will. He is naturally strong as fuck, and I'm just tired of picking these fucking slow, fat, plotty heavyweights that don't have a lot of sting in their hands. I'm sick and tired of it. So I'm going to be picking Muhammad Usman, who's just absolutely roided to the fucking teeth as well. You know, of course, him and Kamaru Usman's dad is the absolute plug when it comes to that shit. So no surprise there. But I think he's just going to be able to fucking trudge across the octagon, shove Mick Parkin against the cage, probably land the more damaging and impactful shots. And I think that the judges will look at that, giving him a lot of the rounds based on just control against the fence, more thudding punches. I think that Mick Parkin will be landing some jabs and some low kicks on Usman. But since the dude looks like he's a fucking crocodile out there, I don't really think he's going to feel a lot of effect from those little pitter-pat shots. So I'm going to be taking Muhammad Usman to win a decision here in a really ugly fight, but hopefully he kind of pushes the pace and makes it at least a little bit entertaining. And of course, he's roided to the fucking teeth. Absolute monster of a human being. Big, brolic, scary motherfucker. So I'm going to be picking him to win this first fight of the night. For our next fight on the card, we got Igor Severino versus Andre Lima. And I'm going to be picking Andre Lima here in this fight to get it done by a decision. And both of these guys are making their debuts in the UFC, so there's not really a ton to go off of. Of course, you can always look at tape for these guys debuting, but it's always going to be different when they're in the high-pressure scenario, actually under the bright lights of the UFC. So it's always going to be a little bit inconsistent there, but Igor Severino is only 20 years of age, so it really makes you wonder, is he going to be physically ready to step up and face these high-level guys that are already in their mid-20s, 30s, in their physical prime, because you're just simply not fully developed at the age of 20. So that's going to be another one of the main reasons I'm picking Andre Lima here. Lima also has an extensive kickboxing Muay Thai record where he's looked pretty impressive, at least on paper. So I expect his striking to be pretty clean for the most part. And Igor Severino does train out of Shootabox, so he's probably going to come out pretty aggressively. And I could see him running into a shot from Andre Lima that he just times really well, countering that really aggressive style that the Shootbox fighters tend to use. But like I said, not a lot of things to really get into the weeds with in this fight, but I'm going to be taking Andre Lima to get a decision here over the 20-year-old Igor Severino. Our next fight on the card, we got Steve Wynn versus Jarno Aarons, and I'm going to be taking Steve Wynn to win this fight, no pun intended, pretty dominantly. I think he can find a KO in this fight. Jarno Aarons has lost a decision to William Gomi, and there's not really much else to say there. He looks like he's just going out there and shadow boxing in the octagon for 15 minutes, and he just does not have any type of urgency or pressure to his game. Just kind of goes out there and floats around doing a whole bunch of nothing. But Jarno Aarons, 0-2 in the UFC, and has not looked too impressive in either of those fights. Steve Wynn, on the other hand, has showed some determination kind of getting his career back on track. He only has lost the one fight, which was in the Dana White Contender Series, which was a flying knee. But since then, he's been on a path to make his comeback, and he got another win on the Dana White Contender Series. Didn't get awarded the contract, but kept his head down, kept working hard, and got another opportunity last season on the Dana White Contender Series, beating the fuck out of AJ Cunningham, who I know is a can, but Steve Wynn looked really good in that fight, and I don't think he's going to have much trouble doing the same thing to Jarno Aarons here. So give me Steve Wynn to win this by a knockout in the second round. Our next fight on the card, we got Miles Johns versus Cody Gibson. And Cody Gibson, one of these guys that was on the most recent season of The Ultimate Fighter. He was in the veteran group who were very, very unimpressive. None of those guys were really that good at all. And I don't understand why the producers of The Ultimate Fighter, the decision makers, decided to bring a bunch of guys that were already cut from the UFC. They ended up beating a lot of the prospects anyway, who were just absolute dog shit. But it just goes to show that the most recent season of The Ultimate Fighter did not produce a lot of good talent. And Brad Katona ended up beating Cody Gibson in the final. And if you're losing to Brad Katona in a war, I'm going to pick Miles Johns to beat you, because Brad Katona, I mean, he's not terrible, but he just did not perform good at all at UFC 297. And I think that loss is kind of aging poorly for Cody Gibson, especially the fact that Brad Katona is kind of at the same stature of Miles Johns. They're both kind of small for the bantamweight division. Cody Gibson, kind of a long, lankier guy who likes to stay at the end of, a crisp jab, using his length there pretty well. But if you're unable to get really anything going against Brad Katona, who, has just lost in his UFC fight, his real UFC fight that wasn't the finale of Tough, and, Cody Gibson getting cut from the UFC back in the day wasn't good enough to stick around. Miles Johns at least is getting some wins in the UFC against okay competition. Miles Johns isn't anything to write home about, but I just don't think, especially at 36 years of age in the bantamweight division, that Cody Gibson is going to be able to revitalize his career this late, especially after already getting cut, already losing the finale of The Ultimate Fighter. I'm all for giving everybody a chance, but I just don't understand why Dana White is keeping some of these guys around other than just to fill up the prelims of these fucking Apex cards in Dana's dungeon. But I'm going to go with Miles Johns here to get it done, just because I don't really rate Cody Gibson that highly. But don't be surprised if he somehow manages to improve a fuck ton over a small amount of time and, have a jab looking like Sean Strickland going out there. But for my official call, give me Miles Johns by a round 3 ground and pound TKO after dropping him with a big gnarly hook or something along those lines. Our next fight on the card, we got Ricardo Ramos versus Julian Erosa. And I'm going to be picking Ricardo Ramos to get a TKO in the second round here in this fight. Julian Erosa, even though me and him have the same name, I cannot pick him in this fight. He just isn't super dangerous, and nothing really jumps off the page about him. He's had some decent wins, but 36 years of age, I don't like that at all, especially in the featherweight division. Coming in against a really dangerous opponent in Ricardo Ramos, who has really grown up in the UFC, started fighting in the UFC in 2017. So being only 28 years of age now, he's basically grown up in the promotion since the age of 21, which I really like. A lot of these guys that get started in the UFC at a younger age, they get used to the pressure, they get used to the level of competition a lot faster than these guys who get started a little bit later in life. And Ricardo Ramos has a decent record. He's really only lost to solid levels of competition. You're talking about Said Nurmagomedov, Lerone Murphy, Zubaira Tukhugov, and Charles Jourdain. None of those are really bad losses that I would take a lot away from you for. And he's a dangerous fighter. Sometimes he throws caution to the wind a little bit too much, throwing super flashy techniques, jumping left round kicks, spinning kicks to the body, and as well as spinning elbows, which he got a nasty spinning elbow KO in his most recent victory against Danny Chavez. And he showed that he could be effective with those techniques on a decently consistent basis. So I like somebody that actually tries to go out there and land damaging shots. He also landed a nasty spinning elbow against Ayman Zahabi back in the day in 2017, I believe. So he has the ability to throw something crazy and catch you off guard, but he also has the ability to dial in and just kind of stick to the basics if he needs to. The third round versus Tukhugov comes to mind. He was losing the first 2 rounds of that fight, but in the third round, he really dialed in, just kind of stuck to the basics, leg kicks, body kicks, and punches. And he looked really good in that third round. And it just shows that he can measure himself and not just throw crazy techniques over and over again like he did in the Danny Chavez fight. So if he comes in with a dialed in approach, not going too crazy and doing too much with the jumping attacks and stuff like that, if he can stick behind the basics while mixing in the crazy shots, I think that he can find a TKO in the second round. And Julian Erosa, I just don't think is going to be fast enough to get out of the way of it. So give me Ricardo Ramos by a second round TKO in this fight. I think he might get him with that jumping left round kick, or maybe just a good right hook as Erosa is circling to Ramos's right while he kind of has him back against the cage behind the black line. So that's kind of how I think the finishing sequence could go. But broad stroke, give me Ramos second round KO. Our next fight on the card, we got Trey Ogden versus Kurt Holobaugh. And Kurt Holobaugh is one of these guys, again, coming off of the most recent season of The Ultimate Fighter. But unlike Cody Gibson and Brad Katona, Kurt Holobaugh actually impresses me with his skill set. He did really good in the finale of The Ultimate Fighter against Austin Hubbard, winning that by submission with a nice triangle, after putting on a pretty good performance in that fight as well. And just watching that season of The Ultimate Fighter as well, I don't remember the opponent he was going up against or the 2 opponents he went up against, but he displayed some really good boxing. I like his hooks. They're pretty powerful, and he's able to push people back with that pressure and power that he has. And he kind of just has that like fucking dad strength, like an old leather boot. Even though he's 37 years of age, he goes in there and fights with grit, like he really wants it. And, you know, he's one of these guys that actually, when they're in the cage, seems like they want to be there and are fighting for a purpose. This dude is gritty as fuck. He's from fucking Franklinton, Louisiana. Where the hell is that? No one knows. Dude probably lives in a fucking trailer somewhere and is just dreaming about getting into the UFC, getting that fucking win money. And I think he's going to come in here like a dog. He is an underdog as well, plus 125 against the minus 150 for Trey Ogden. I like Kurt Holobaugh's pressure. I like his power. And I don't think he's going to be one of these guys that just wilts under pressure. And Trey Ogden, he's just kind of one of these guys, you know, not really too much to be said. He's lost to Ignacio Bahamondes, and he's also taken a loss to Jordan Levitt by split decision. I could see him getting this fight done by a decision, but I just can't stop picturing Kurt Holobaugh landing a nasty fucking hook on the chin of Trey Ogden. And I don't think Kurt Holobaugh is going to be taking a step back here in this fight. I think he's going to be pushing forward, landing big shots. And if Trey Ogden shoots a panic takedown or something along those lines, I think that Kurt Holobaugh could wrap him up in a submission. And like I said, I think he really is fighting for a purpose here. 37 years of age, fighting like a 23-year-old hungry man. Lightweight division, I don't mind it as much as a lower weight class. Featherweight, bantamweight, flyweight, being a little bit older. I like him as a dog in this fight. And in his UFC experience, he didn't do as poorly as a lot of these other guys. And like I said, he had some really good performances on Tough. I try not to look into that too much, but like I said, Trey Ogden is really nothing to write home about. So give me Kurt Hollaball by round 2 KO in this fight. I think he's going to catch Trey Ogden with a big old left hook. Moving on to the main card, our first fight on the main card, we got Luis Puello versus Fernando Padilla, and I'm going to be picking Luis to get this done by a second round KO. Fernando Padilla has not really impressed me at all with his performances. I know he got a decent win, a knockout over Julian Erosa, but that's not really anything to brag about. And he did lose a decision last time out versus Kyle Nelson, where he really did not put on a good performance whatsoever, looked really poor. And also, he has only fought 5 times in the last 5 years, and 4 times in the last 3 years. So has been a little bit inactive compared to Luis, who has fought 5 times in the last 2 years. So he's been a lot more active, just now getting into the UFC off of a good win on the Contender Series. And I think he has the boxing that it takes to be able to get on the inside and just rip Padilla to the body. After ripping him to the body, bringing the shots upstairs. And I don't think that Padilla is going to really have the best ability to absorb damage in this fight. I think that Luis is going to have a clear power advantage. I think his hands are going to be better and faster, more sting on the end of his shots. Padilla, I know, is like a long, lanky guy. He's 6'1" for the featherweight division, which is really good. And if he catches you at the end of those long shots, they do have some pop on the end of them. But Luis was a Peruvian national champion in boxing as well, so I really think his defense is going to be pretty good. I could see him taking a couple shots on the guard, getting on the inside, and then just nailing Padilla with a KO blow. And Padilla literally is from Chihuahua, Mexico. Bro's built like a Chihuahua as well, and he fights like one too. Kind of just all bark, no bite for the most part. So give me Luis Puello here by a second round KO. I think he might get him with like an uppercut left hand, drop a big right hand down the pipe, Charles Oliveira versus Justin Gaethje-esque. But I think that Luis has a pretty clear path to victory in this fight. Padilla, I don't think, is going to be able to get it done. And Luis is also a plus 145 underdog. So I think the dogs could be barking for sure on this card. I probably won't bet on it myself, but definitely a solid underdog to take a look at. If you want some plus money on this card, I would definitely look at Luis Puello in this fight here. Starting out the main card, I think he gets it done by a second round KO. Our next fight on the main card, we got Billy Q versus Youssef Zalal. And in this fight, I'm going to be picking Billy Q to get it done by decision. Youssef Zalal is a pretty good fighter. He did get cut from the UFC, unfortunately, after his draw versus Blackshear. Has bounced back with 3 good victories, and he's back in the promotion now, taking on Billy Q. But I think that Billy Q will be able to win this by decision, mainly just with ground control, keeping Zalal against the fence. When Zalal faced Blackshear, Blackshear had a lot of success using a similar takedown entry that Billy Q was trying to use versus Edson Barbosa before he got kneed into oblivion. Throw one strike, throw one kick, instantly change levels. And that was working decently for him, like I said, before he got kneed. And Blackshear was having success with that takedown entry against Zalal in his last fight in the UFC. I think that Billy Q could use a similar entry here to be able to get Zalal to the ground and just hold him there once he gets him there. I like that Zalal trains out of Factory X Muay Thai. A lot of fighters from that gym do impress me with their performances and their overall skill sets. Isaac Dolgarian, Brandon Royval, and I do think that Zalal has a chance if he can keep it on the feet, utilizing a lot of volume and movement. But just after seeing him get taken down and controlled a lot by Blackshear, who was threatening a lot of submissions as well, I have to kind of think that Billy Q might not be able to threaten the submissions as much, but I think he'll be able to maintain that control for the most part of the first 2 rounds. I could see Billy Q sacrificing the 3rd round and losing that on strikes, volume damage, things along those lines, but I think he has a pretty clear path to victory, just getting the takedowns and maintaining that top position on Zalal, who, against Blackshear was scrambling pretty good, using some pretty crafty techniques to be able to get out of bad spots. But I think that Billy Q, at featherweight especially instead of bantamweight, will be able to control Zalal a little bit better than that. So give me Billy Q here by decision. Our next fight on the main card, and in my opinion, is the people's main event. I think this is a fight that most fans are looking forward to the most on this card. We got two excellent young prospects in the bantamweight division going head to head in this one. We got Peyton Talbot versus Cameron Simon, and I am going to be picking Peyton Talbot to get this one done by decision. A lot of people are on the side of Cameron Simon, and for good reason too. He put on a decent performance against C-Rod in his last fight. Unfortunately, did not get the decision there. And a lot of that probably did come down to the fact that C-Rod came in overweight for that fight. And Cameron Simon did put on a good performance, even though he was out-muscled in that fight, mainly in the grappling exchanges, which I could see him definitely having success with here in this fight versus Peyton Talbot. Of course, in Talbot's debut against Nick Aguirre, he was getting controlled pretty bad in that first round, but in the second and third, he was able to pick it up, get his strikes going, maintain that distance, really good body kicks as well, excellent right hands, straight down the pipe, and he was able to get the win by submission in that third round. And Peyton Talbot, if you ever played sports, if you've ever fought or anything like that growing up, you know that there's some kids, some people that they just seem to do whatever they're trying to do without effort. It just comes naturally to them. And Peyton Talbot is kind of giving me those types of vibes. He seems like he's just incredibly present when he's in the octagon. He doesn't seem to overthink the positions that he's in too much. He seems pretty coherent on the feet. He's able to select his shots well, stay poised and composed, and not overthrow, gassing himself out. Like I said, he's really good at maintaining distance, really good right body kicks, especially as the opponent is circling off. He's really good at timing that. Like I said, he has an excellent right hand straight down the middle, and his striking really does impress me. He has some good power for the bantamweight division, and like I said, he's just super calm and composed out there. Never looks like he's overthinking anything, and I really like that from a fighter, especially a young guy on the come up, only 25 years of age. And Cameron Simon, like I said, he could find some grappling openings against Peyton, holding him down and securing around that way, but I don't think he's going to be able to close that distance and get his hands locked around Peyton Talbot without taking a lot of damage. Talbot will throw a knee right up the middle, in the clinch. If they get locked up in that position, probably will be able to disengage using those good knees that he does have. And Cameron Simon, he kind of reminds me of like a miniature Dricus du Plessis. Of course, they do train out of that same gym, but I don't think that Cameron Simon is really going to be dangerous enough to threaten Peyton Talbot on the feet enough to level change by pushing him back against the fence. I think that Peyton Talbot is going to be maintaining the center of the octagon for the most part. Cameron Simon trying to close the distance, getting tagged with the right hand down the middle every single time he tries to do it, similarly to maybe how Fiziev was getting tagged up with the right hand from Gamrot. I could see some similar shots happening in this fight, and I don't think that Cameron Simon will be able to get the grappling going enough to get on the better end of the judges' scorecards, because I think that Peyton Talbot's going to be doing a lot more damage in this fight. Like I said, though, I think this is an excellent match that the UFC has put together here. Two really good up-and-coming prospects. Really excited for this one, but in this fight, give me Peyton Talbot by decision, mainly just winning the rounds off of damage, getting controlled a little bit, but I think he will have the better of the striking exchanges in this one against Cameron Simon. Really looking forward to Peyton Talbot's future in the sport. So give me Peyton Talbot by decision here. Our next fight on the card, we got Edmen Shahbazyan versus AJ Dobson. And I'm going to be picking Edmen Shahbazyan to absolutely starch AJ Dobson in the first round. Edmen is really good in the first round. Good striking, puts on a pace, but he does tend to gas out a little bit. some people just don't have a great gas tank. You think about Chimaev, for example, gets tired pretty easily in the later rounds of his fights. And Edmund Sabazian, when he has lost, it has mainly been due to grappling, getting him tired, surviving that first round onslaught that he'll put on, and then eventually using the grappling control to find a TKO or just win a decision. And Edmund Sabazian, he's only losing to really good guys. You're talking about Brunson, Anthony Hernandez, who's just an absolute issue, Crafty Man, Jack Hermanson, who just beat Joe Pyfer, and you also got Nasruddin Imavov, who is one of the more technical strikers in that middleweight division. He survived that first round, and he was able to stop Edmund with elbows on the ground after he hurt him with a shot on the feet. I believe it was a nice knee in the clinch, but I think that at range, Edmund is not really going to have a lot of issues, especially with a kind of simple striker like AJ Dobson, who's not going to be mixing in the grappling like Imavov, Brunson, Jack Hermanson. I think that he's going to have a much more clear path to victory here, not having to worry about the takedowns nearly as much. And I think that just with his pressure and tenacity that he's going to have in the first round, I think that he'll be able to find a shot that stops AJ Dobson. So give me Edmund Sabazian by first round KO. We move on to the co-main event of the evening. We got Justin Tafa versus Carl Williams, and I don't understand why they keep putting these fucking heavyweights at the top of the bill each time instead of a fight like Cameron Simon versus Peyton Talbot. I just simply don't understand it. Like last week, we had fucking Tuivasa versus Tybura, which was entertaining for as long as it lasted, but I'm kind of tired of these heavyweights being at the top of the bill. Fucking Gaziev versus Rosenstrike was just pathetic to watch as a main event, to be honest. So I'm sick and tired of these fucking fat, plotty heavyweights. And, hopefully guys like Ribas de Spain will be able to come in here and clean fucking shop, and we'll be able to get some real athletes in the heavyweight division. But we got Justin Tafa versus Carl Williams here in the co-main event. I'm going to be taking Carl Williams here to get a decision because he actually looks athletic and looks like he takes his career seriously and doesn't eat fucking Taco Bell and McDonald's for every meal. I know that, heavyweights, they're always going to carry a little bit more body fat, but I am not fucking picking these fat fucks anymore on my prediction videos. Justin Tafa's brother had to step in for him against DeLima, and he got leg kicked to oblivion. And now Justin is having to step in for Junior against Carl Williams. So Carl Williams, he's basically going to have the exact same matchup except for a fatter opponent because Justin's a little bit bigger than Junior. But, unless Justin Tafa goes out there and lands a bomb on Carl Williams, I think that Carl Williams, not being a obese human being, will be able to find himself a decision victory just because he'll actually still be athletic in the second and third rounds. And I don't think that Justin Tafa will be. But predicting heavyweight fights is a fucking shot in the dark most of the time because they're just so inconsistent. But I'm going to be taking Carl Williams here in this fight over Tafa. I don't really like the switcheroo that him and his brother did from 298 and then on this card as well. I don't like it one bit. Give me Carl Williams to get this one done by decision. I don't think that Tafa is going to have really any type of game plan other than just swinging a big old fat bomb over the top. And if Carl Williams doesn't get hit by that, I think he finds a pretty easy decision victory here. So yeah, give me Carl Williams by decision in this fight in the co-main event of the evening. We move on to the main event of the evening. And I don't know about you guys, but I have been losing sleep over this one. I probably haven't slept in a couple of days just going through the X's and O's of this matchup, pacing back and forth, pulling my hair out, wondering who's going to win. The consequences are just so huge for this fight and both of these fighters' careers. And, this has fight of the year written all over it, if you ask me. Fuck Peyton Talbot versus Cameron Simon. This is the matchup we want to see, right? No, obviously, I'm just kidding. This fight is... holy fuck, dude. These Apex Fight Night card main events are just atrocious. But, at least we got Rose. And, Amanda Ribas, I think I'd rather jump into a pit of needles than rewatch more than one of her fights. But, I'm going to be picking Rose here to get it done. Much better fighter overall. 2 wins over Zhang Wei Li. Looks really good on paper. She did break her hand in her last fight, so I'll cut her a little slack for that. She's had a bit more time to grow into her frame for this new division that she is in. Hopefully she's done a good amount of strength training, stuff along those lines, to be able to have better physicality in there. But much better boxing, much better striking. Just overall a much better fighter than Amanda Ribas. Rose, she's fought at that championship level before, and I don't think she's going to have any trouble getting a decision victory here in the main event of UFC Vegas 89. But, I hope she gets the win. Everybody loves Rose. You got to feel for her, with her situation with Pat Barry. You got to feel for poor Rose, but I think she gets it done here by decision against Amanda Ribas. What more is there to say about the WMMA main event? Thank you guys for watching the video. Let me know what you guys think about the predictions, any comments I made in the comment section below. Like and subscribe. Thank you guys, and have a wonderful rest of your day.